consulting for a while before, in-house for Apple, and then in management consulting. And then I moved into the tech startup world and the entrepreneurship world because I felt there's much more impact there, and much more interesting to work in that space with founders, etc. So for the last 12 years or so, I've been almost exclusively advising tech companies, right? Working very closely with tech companies and entrepreneurs, right? While at the same time, in parallel, being involved in venture capital and in accelerators as well. So I'm coming from about 3 or 4 different angles here, right? Just so you can contextualize this and how important and relevant it is for you, right? That's up to you to decide based on where this is coming from. So one angle is through working with corporates a lot. And as a management consultant, we do a lot with numbers, a lot of spreadsheets, lots of numbers. And most of the best corporates in the world build their strategies through a number-oriented methodology, very numbers-oriented, right? So that's one angle. The other angle is in terms of advising companies. And what I've learned over time, and this is, in my opinion, this is really undisputed based on my experience, it's that the top 1% of companies are very numbers-driven, almost without exception, right? So what I've learned is that the best decision makers within companies are able to quantify the decisions they make, but at the same time model things and analyze things so that they make very precise decisions, right? At the same time. So it's for one. The second is from a decision-making perspective. The third angle I come from is from a venture capital perspective, right? So I've helped build a few VCs in Asia, and I'm still involved in several VCs as a venture partner and advisor, and accelerators that are attached to VCs. And from their perspective, also if they're investing in companies, the best VCs, almost without exception, will look into how well you can, I guess, understand the implication of numbers in your business, but also what the outcome in terms of numbers are, right, as a result of what you're doing, right? So they really look at that carefully, especially when you get to Series A and above, right? Early stage, I think you can get away with not being numbers oriented because it's much more about the product and the journey and the mission and the founder, right, and the potential. But then it becomes very numbers oriented, right? And the other thing is they like to play with scenarios as well, right, which usually comes from a financial model, etc. And one great thing about Founders Institute is they do, I guess, get you into a numbers mindset through, financial model template, etc. So strongly recommend you use that template and you learn more about modeling, and then you, I guess, complement that with a metrics-driven approach, right? So yeah, that's basically my background, and I'm involved in quite a few VCs and accelerators, etc. So moving on, right? So basically, just quickly, also the main business I'm involved in now is called Launchr. We provide a suite of services for entrepreneurs, and these are examples of them here. I won't get deep into the business now. I think I'll get Amy to share a link or something maybe, so you can have a look at it, right? And also we're offering discounts to FI cohorts, right? You can basically go on the website, if there's anything you find interesting, we can give you a significant discount on that, as a strong partner and someone who cares about FI a lot, and vice versa, right? And also I'll give you an example of something at the end of this that's quite specific to metrics and numbers. Okay, so getting onto the topic, right? So the first topic we'll get into is pricing, right? Oh, also one more thing, we'll make this as interactive as possible, all right? If you've got any questions or comments as we go along, feel free to jump in. That being said, especially because this is more of a virtual session, it might be easier just to save it if you can till the end, and I'll try to ensure that we leave 15 minutes or so at least at the end of the session, right? So I'll pretty much run through quite the others in 45 minutes, right? Even though there's a lot of detail, right? And also there is a lot of detail in these slides, right? Don't get intimidated if you don't understand all the detail. The way I recommend you to approach this is think of this almost as a cheat sheet and as a reference point to various things, right? So think of it as if these are the things you need to be aware of, and then almost as a checklist when you need to dig deeper into something, either dig deeper in your own time, reach out to the mentors in the program, right? Or you can even speak to me one-on-one and we can organize that through IAMI or directly through me as well. Okay, so don't worry if you don't understand everything here, even though it's not rocket science, right? It's more principles that are important at this point. Okay, so pricing wise, Let's get into pricing approaches first. All right. So what I mean by approaches is when you build a new business or a new product, especially if it's something quite innovative, right? And it oftentimes tends to be innovative. If you're in Founders Institute, it's already assumed. Firstly, you're quite good at what you do because of the stringent qualification process and vetting process FI has. But secondly, you're probably quite innovative in some form in what you're doing, right? You're either building a new type of product or service, or you're building an existing type of product and service to a new market, right? So you're probably innovative in some form, right? Or it's a combination of those things, right? Or you're taking something that exists and iterating on that, right? So either way, there needs to be a refreshing, sort of a refreshed view in terms of not just the building and the market acquisition and the strategy part, but also how do you price it, right? Generally speaking, there are really three approaches to pricing, right? By and large, there are three broad approaches. And what you'll find is that what you end up pricing your products and services at will effectively be a synergy of these, right? Or where these three meet together, right? So it's a coming together of these three approaches. Okay. So the first approach, which is usually the one that most, I guess, business owners or management teams or founders tend to think about by default, right? This is the one that comes naturally to most people, right? It's what you call cost plus, right? Cost plus is one name for it, right? There are other terms for it as well, right? But these are the names that I think resonates, right? So one is cost plus. What cost plus means is based on what you perceive or you predict to be your cost base, right? What do you need to price your product on top of that for you to effectively be a profitable business, right? And that might not be immediately, it might be down the line, but either way, this is still one of the most important, right? Arguably the most important, right? Approach in terms of coming up with a pricing range, right? That's the way I'd like you to think about it, right? What's a pricing range or a minimum price that down the line you need to price at for your business to be commercially viable in the medium to long term, right? And that's factoring in early on with your type of business, you'll have costs that exceed revenue, usually, right? And because you have to experiment a bit, you have to put more money in user acquisition, you have to validate before pricing more, product market fit, all that stuff, all that good stuff, right? But this is one approach, right? And I recommend you model this out, right, in a cost plus way to begin with, right? The second approach is to look at competitive pricing, right? So what we mean by this is effectively, and this is the way I like to think about it, right? It might not be the textbook way to think about it, or it's not the exact definition of competitive, but the way I encourage you to think about it is, what would my target users pay for a service or product that's comparable to mine, therefore a potential alternative to mine, right? And that's the essence of where competitive pricing comes from, right? Whether it's a direct competitor or not. So whether or not it's the exact type of, say, SaaS platform or consumer product or not, right? What's an alternative that a consumer or a target user would pay for it, right? And that's the second approach, right? And this then will take that initial range, which was quite high, and narrow it down into a smaller range, in theory, right? Saying this is what our competitors or the alternatives in the market are available for, and then apply adjustments based on how your product or service varies, right? The third one, which is the one I think gets thought about the least, right? But I think this is the one that the top 1 to 5% of companies do very well. It's value-based pricing, right? I would say from my experience, and this is working with, at this point, it's more than 300 companies I've advised, right? Some very deeply, some less deeply. But, I've got some data points to come from, right? So I would say less than 5 to 10% of companies that I speak with, right? And these good companies, for the most part, even consider the notion of value-based pricing, right? They would consider cost-based almost all the time. To an extent, competitive, the ones who are a bit more research-oriented, right? And the ones who know their market very well. But I would say only 5 to 10% of companies think of value-based pricing in an effective way, right? What is value-based pricing, if you're not aware? It's quite complicated, right? It's more complicated and more nuanced than the first two. But the simplified version is, what would my consumer, right, or my target user be willing to pay that's beneficial to them, right? Based on, and that could be based on a number of factors, right? And what it's based on depends on what type of product and service you have, right? If your product and service effectively saves them money or brings more efficiencies to that company or that person, right? Then it can start off with how much money are they saving, how much time are they saving, right? If your product or service adds value to that company or individual, right, then it's about how much additional money are they making, right? If it's more nuanced than that, you have to be more nuanced in your analytics and thinking, right? A very simple example of this, and this probably doesn't apply to most of you, right? Is if you're a criminal lawyer, right? Cost plus is based on, okay, what is my time worth as a lawyer, and what am I paying for in terms of my operational cost running a law firm, the interns, the associates, the etc. Right? That's quite simple. Competitive is what other law firms offering, right? And then how do I change from that? Or other lawyers offering. Value based, if you're a criminal lawyer, on top of that would be, how much would someone pay me to stay out of jail, for example, right? That's a lot more nuanced, right? But effectively, the whole system, the whole legal system starts off with that starting point, and then they narrow down to cost plus and competitive, right? Management consultants, similar, right? For example, which is my background, right? So these are three approaches I encourage you to think through, right? And when you're coming up with pricing, go through all of these methodologies, and then you'll come up with a range. Okay, so there are other considerations as well, right? So one major consideration is it should all also be based on what your business goals and OKRs, which are objective key results, right, of your business are based on your stage of your business, right? So for example, if you're at a very early stage where your primary focus is product market fit, user acquisition, or basically market discovery, right? Then you probably want to put less focus on your current pricing on cost plus, right? Then it should be, what can I price in terms of acquiring users and achieving those main goals of the business, right? Such as determining product market fit and getting users, right? When you get to a later stage of your business, which is, okay, proven product market fit, I've got some great feedback, I've got retention, etc. Then you start thinking about monetization and becoming profitable, right? More so than before. And then you can start implementing more of a cost plus methodology, more of a competitive and value-based methodology, right, onto that. And then when you're scaling, it becomes different after that as well, right? So whatever you do in your business, whatever major decision you make, and this is a principle that applies to anything, not just pricing or numbers, right? It should all be aligned to what your core business goals are at that point in time, right? If it's not, then something's out of sync, right? Then you either change your goals or you change your activities, right? And your decisions as a result of those goals, right? Okay, so the next thing is, what are the factors that affect pricing, right? So you can't just willy-nilly change pricing, right?
Just to interrupt, I think
Yeah.
Himani's asked me, you're not showing slides, right? I think she was just wondering whether there are any slides.
Oh,
You're
I
not
am showing slides. I
You
am.
are
Oh,
showing
wow.
slides. Okay.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot to share my slides. But it's okay. It's okay. There's only one full slide that you guys have missed. So sorry. Okay, I forgot to share screen.
Thank you to Hirani for noticing, because I thought you were doing it without slides for now.
Oh, no. I'm definitely sharing slides. Yeah. Just give me a second. I'll just find the Zoom. Sorry, guys. I actually shared in the beginning to test it, and then I guess I unshared after that. Okay. Thanks for calling me out there. Okay, so I'll just run through the slides super quickly, right? That I've done so far. Can you guys see that? Okay, can you see Ayami, the slide?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just run through it super quickly. So that's me and my background. This is my business summary, and then pricing, and then got into pricing approaches, cost plus, competitive, value based, right? The three types that I mentioned. And then what should it be based on? It should be based on your business goals primarily, right? And now we're up to this part. Okay, So thankfully, these are super simple slides, right? So you haven't missed a lot, right? And now what are the drivers and factors that affect pricing, right? You can't just change pricing willy-nilly and hope for the best, right? You have to think about, obviously, start off with the theoretical stuff that I went through, but then the devil's in both the details and the viability, viability, and evidence, right? That's what it comes down to, right? And this is what the drivers and factors. This is where the drivers and factors come into play, right? So you have to be able to tweak things inside your business in terms of, and that could be your product, that could be your approach, that could be your target customers, right? That could be a bunch of things, right? Service levels, to be able to adapt to the pricing that you want, right? But ultimately, your pricing that really makes sense will be a result of the value you're driving to your customers, right? And how you package it overall, right? So you can't sort of change one without changing another lever in your business, right? You can't say, oh, cost plus demands I have a 20% profit margin, therefore this is my price. You can't do that if it doesn't make sense from a value-based perspective to the user, right? And then you can't increase based on value-based theory unless it makes sense to the user, right? So two principles here, right? One is be aware of everything you need to change within your business to be able to optimize pricing, right? And there's more than you think, right? There's way more than you think that you can change, right? The second thing is there's so much of product market fit and price discovery involved here, right? We talk about product market fit in terms of the product itself, right? A lot, right? And maybe identifying the users and the target users, right? But there's product market fit in everything you do as a business, right? Every time you make a major decision, you've got to figure out the product market fit of that, right? And then hone into that. And as you get better, that's when you can get more refined. And a good example is pricing, right? You'll be in price discovery for your first few years, right? In my business, which is Launchr, we've been live for about 2 years now. We're still figuring out pricing, right? Every couple of weeks, I refine pricing with my co-founder, which is kind of ridiculous, but you have to be on top of it, right? Consistently and keep optimizing because you're smarter every week than you were the week before, right? And your product's better, right? And various other things, right? So this is an ongoing thing, right? Okay, so these are the factors that influence it, right? Next is we'll get into just a couple of things. And by the way, I spent a bit of time on the approaches, right? I'm going to run through the rest of the slides fairly quickly. Apologies in advance for that, right? And it will be quite heavy, but we'll have questions at the end, and you'll have these as reference slides that are given to you, right? Okay, so I want to go through one example of type of pricing. There are many types of pricing, like I guess ways to articulate pricing to users, right? But tiered is one example, right? And it's my favorite example, right? So tiered is basically what you're doing is you're maximizing the ways that your consumers can pay for this and maximizing your revenue opportunity, right? And also, the other thing you're doing is you're widening the funnel of your users when you tier your pricing, right? One very common mistake that I see, I personally think is a mistake, right, is when companies come up with one pricing, singular pricing, right? The first reason I think it's a mistake is unless you're an absolute expert in what you're doing and the authority in what you're doing, and you've been that for several years, I don't know how you can think of what that perfect price is, right? I've been involved in industries for decades, right? 10 years plus, and I still can't come up with a single price for a single company for a single product, right? I don't think I'm anywhere near that smart, right? So you have to experiment and you have to try different pricing points, right? To come up with what that right pricing is and widen your funnel, right? So that's one reason why. The second reason is that there are basically 2 or 3 objectives of tiered pricing, right? One, which is the first tier, is to get as many users onto your platform as possible. So that's got to be a very low barrier, right? And you've got to price that very low or for free, right? Especially when you're at the early stage of a business, right? The last tier, the third tier, is where you make your margins, right? That's where ideally, that's the maximum price that you can justify charging, right? But you throw as much value at them as possible, right? And that's where you make your margins, right? A lot of the best businesses I know, they make more than 60% or 70% of their margins from the last year itself. And some of them are loss leading or make actually, just break even or make slight losses from their first year because it serves a different purpose, right? But typically you've got most of your users in your middle tier, right? This is your balance of those two, right? It's a balance of hopefully profitable, right? Value-based pricing makes a lot of sense, right, to the user. And it's affordable to the majority of our users, or to at least critical mass of our users, right? And that's your middle tier. Now, the other principle here is you want to tier this such that psychologically it makes sense for users to go from one tier to the next tier, right? So the difference in value to them overrides the difference in cost to them, right? And that's where, again, that's where the really, really smart pricing strategies work, right? Compared to the average ones, the ones where they can get people to tier, to move from one tier to another almost seamlessly and consistently, right? It's not to say everyone should be in your last tier. If everyone's in your last tier, I would argue your last tier is not expensive enough, for example, right? So it's got to be a balance of the three, right? And there are other things there are other principles on top of this as well, right? Consider trials, right? Trial or free periods, right? And it could be limited time offers of trials, or you could always have a free trial, right? Add-ons on top of this can be very useful as well, right? Add-ons is where you customize things more it's one form of customization, right? And then you've got customization and volume discounts, right? Where you can have drop down where they choose number of users or they choose number of features or whatever it is, right? And it could be a drop down where they enter an amount and you've got an algorithm behind the scenes that determines how much that particular customer pays for it based on what they want. So you give them a chance to cherry pick in a way. That's an option, right? And you can also, by the way, have this example from DocuSign. They call it advanced solutions. Some companies call it enterprise solutions, etc., where there's no price there, right? It's to say there are enough customers who I don't want to put a price for, who I completely customize for. And sometimes it makes sense not to be transparent with that, and more you customize it behind the scenes, right? Okay, so now let's get into pricing models, right? Actually, before we go, any questions so far on pricing approaches or tiered pricing? And we'll just do 1 or 2 questions maximum. Or we can save it till the end. Okay, we'll keep going. Okay, so basically now what we'll do is we'll go through different pricing model examples, right? We won't be able to go through each of these in a lot of detail, obviously in the interest of time, right? But the way you should approach this is think of these as examples and as a checklist, right? So this is what I recommend you do, right? I'd say your current business or your theoretical pricing model or your actual pricing model is probably amongst this somewhere, right? It might be one of these, it might be 2 of these. In some rare exceptions, you'll have 3 of these, right? That you've considered for your business. What I would recommend you do is consider all of these almost as an exhaustive checklist, right? And then say, is it viable or not viable, viable or not viable, or very viable, right? The reason, like I do this with every company I advise in this area, right? And it's amazing how often I see companies who have not thought about a particular pricing model, right? Just because they were inclined to think about it for whatever reason, right? Everyone's got biases and limitations in what they currently know, right? Or have experienced. And that's why I encourage you to think of this exhaustively and then say, no, 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 yes, no, yes, no, yes, etc. And then dig deeper into after that. Okay, so first pricing models I'd like to come up with are, the first one is paper item, which is a very common example, right? And paper items basically, you have a product, you pay for it one time, right? And like an example, there's a Logitech mouse, for example, right? And this is traditionally probably the one we're most wired to think about naturally, right? Because for most of our lives and our parents' lives, this has probably been the most predominant way we pay for things, right? It's paying for a single item or a single service, right? Then you've got franchising, and McDonald's is, possibly the most famous version of this. Some would consider the pioneers of this, right? Where you've got a service or product, right? and you found a way to enable other people to sell that service or product, right? And you have a certain consistency around that you I guess mandate, right? That could be in branding, could be in pricing, it can be in many different things, right? But that's what franchising is. But by the way, this isn't in any particular order, right? Then there's subscription, and actually think of that as consumer subscription, right? That's what I mean here, right? Subscription is a bit more of a modern day pricing approach. When I say modern day, since the 2000s, right? When the tech boom came about, and especially for consumer technical products, right? This is a very common way of pricing, right? And basically the principle here is you have a regular amount that your consumers pay for on an ongoing basis, right? Could be tiered or might not be tiered, right? The key principle here is you have to be able to add ongoing value to your users. If you're not adding ongoing value to your users that you can track and measure and be able to cut off that value, then this won't work, right? So if you can add ongoing value and you can control that value on an ongoing basis, right, then subscription isn't an option, right? Okay, next is, oh, sorry, this slide shouldn't be there, right? This is replace that one. Please ignore this one. This is the right slide, okay? Consumer subscription, right? And then you've got revenue share or marketplace, which is again, which is a fairly modern, in a way, it's a modern pricing model, but effectively the principle here is you're connecting different types of stakeholders, right? Or you're creating value that either one of those stakeholders otherwise wouldn't have been able to create themselves, right? In return for that, you're effectively taking a share in some form, right? Now, this is a modern type of revenue model for a tech company, but this is one of the oldest types of pricing models. This is effectively what brokering is, right? So traditional brokering, etc., which has existed for centuries, right? That's effectively what this is, right? You're creating an outcome and you're taking a percentage of that overall outcome value in whatever way you calculate that. Then there's advertising, right? Which you could argue could be a revenue model or could be just a business model, right? But effectively, like I consider a revenue model because what you're doing there is you're giving someone else a platform or access to users and you're charging them for that, right? This works, right? If you've got critical mass of end users that you're targeting, you're paying consumers to pay for, right? This is a very hard business model, right? One of the common mistakes I see is a lot of early stage companies build consumer businesses and try to monetize advertising. I've seen very few work off the bat, right? And usually it takes several years of iteration and pain before they get this right. And the reason is you need critical mass, right? To even justify an advertiser considering to advertise on your platform, let alone then that business model making sense to you, right? So there's a lot of scale required here, right? But the companies I've seen that do it well are able to curate it and find a niche, a very effective niche, and they're able to dominate, right, the engagement of that niche, and then advertisers will pay for that privilege, right, to access them. Right. Okay. And then there's more traditional financial type of business models, right? There's interest, which is what a lot of banks do, and asset appreciation as well. They'll sell you something at a certain price, and they'll help you or they'll hope for it to value over time, right? And then they might make a cut over that, or there's a creative model around that, right? That's how the property market works effectively, right? And this can work with tech companies if you're in this space, right? Then you've got licensing, which is sort of a tech company play on franchising, right? That's what licensing is effectively, right? And then you've got white label, which is getting to one of my favorite models, right? White label is where you can enable others to effectively promote your product and service to their consumers and in their brand, right? So you're building the core capability for that and you're scaling it through them, right? You'll have to give up probably your end user brand for this, right? And this is what a lot of, especially less experienced founders struggle with, right? The more experienced founders have no problem giving up their brand for the long-term commercial outcome, right? And that's where white labeling becomes really powerful, right? And then you've got more services types of business models, right? You can charge for the hour, you can charge for consulting, which could be again by the hour based on outcomes, or you charge for implementation. This is common among services and consulting businesses, right? Or it can be common among tech businesses that are building a tech product for a company and who is especially involved in customizing that, and you can charge implementation upfront, right? This is good because it can be a cash cow, right? It can be because it's money upfront, right? Often not very thought about, right? Just give me a sec. Time check. Ayumi, how much time have we got left, by the way? I just want to make sure. I'm just making sure my time is right.
7:40 right now. You can go a little over 8. Like it's
Okay.
like, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Because whoever who needs to can
Okay,
leave.
good.
So I think it's okay.
Okay, so we'll cover the rest of the presentation part in about 10 minutes, right? And then we'll go questions, right? Okay, so then there's transaction fee, right? Such as Stripe. Transaction fee, in a way, it's similar to revenue share or marketplace, right? But the way it's different is that it's not necessarily a commission. It's not a percentage commission oftentimes, right? Behind the scenes, they might do the commission calculation, but they usually tier the pricing. It could be based on a transaction amount, for example, or transaction tier, right? In addition to features, right? Now, transaction fee comes into play, obviously, if you're a company that's involved in payments, right? But there are also other models, also other types of companies as well, right? Then you've got freemium, right? This is a brilliant business model as well. Dropbox do this very well, right? And this is effectively offering the product for free, the base product for free, and they make money from upselling into premium or more advanced solutions or features, right? Oh, and by the way, just another thing I should say is a lot of these can work in intersection, right? The best companies I know probably have something like 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these working in synergy, right? More than 5, I think that's getting a bit. Then you need to be, are you a Google or Microsoft, right? I'll ask the question, right? Are you a corporate at that point? But, I'd say most really good tech startups have at least 2 of these. Some have 3 or 4 of these, right? Working together. So for example, freemium can work very well with enterprise and with subscription, right? So yeah, so freemiums basically offer your base product for free, or what's a version of your product you can offer for free just to get users. And then what can you monetize on top of that, right? And enterprise SaaS, which is personally my favorite type of model. Then again, I'm very biased. That's based on the fact that I tend to focus more on B2B companies in terms of companies I have equity in, right? But from an investor's perspective also, they love enterprise SaaS because if you do this properly, the margins can be pretty high. It can be very predictable, and it can be very scalable, right? And we'll talk about those drivers in a second, right? But obviously, enterprise SaaS works more of your B2B company. It's effectively the equivalent of consumer subscription, right? Okay. Next, let's get into pricing model objective, right? Now, where does this all tie in together, right? This is all nice to know, I think. So first, take it as a checklist, right? But now, how do you get to the next level of decision-making here, right? And this is a framework I've tried to come up with that I work with a lot of founders, constantly iterating it, so it's far from perfect, right? And this is a very simplified version of it, right? The way I hope you think about it is, what are your pricing model objectives, right? It's almost like asking the question, and I try to be a bad psychologist every time I speak to founders who are building a business for the first time. I always start with the question, what are you trying to achieve by building a business, right? Are you trying to achieve freedom? Are you trying to achieve, insane amounts of money? Are you trying to solve a big problem? What is it, right? Are you trying to have fun, right? Every founder is different, and the business should be based on those objectives. And the pricing model objectives should also be based on what you think is important for your business based on your goals for the business, right? And this is what I mean by this, right? This is something I've sort of come up with, so it's very rough, right? When I think of outcomes of pricing or outcomes of a business model, these are the 4 things that I put into consideration, right? Profitability, scalability, predictability, and viability, right? There are many other factors as well, right? But for me, these four factors bucket most of those in together in some form, right? And to me, if you think of four, and only four, these are the four you should be thinking of, right? And when you are a CEO or CFO, especially of your company, you should always be thinking in these lines about your business, right? To what extent is each of these important, right? Based on the overall mission of my business, right? And also based on my specific goals of my business at that specific time, right? Now, when I put on my due diligence hat, right, and I'm going and vetting companies, when I vet business models, I actually do this vetting in my head, and I've got analysis behind the scenes where I score companies based on these factors, which is kind of ridiculous, right? But when I do that, it's amazing how much I can realize about the potential of that business, right? So what do I mean here, right? Simplistically speaking, so profitability is how much margin you can make, right? And also think of that as cash flow positive for your business, right? How you bring in cash to your business, right? Super important, right? Cash is the livelihood of business in the short, medium, and long term. Therefore, at some point, unless you're surviving on funds you raised, which shouldn't be the case long term, profitability becomes critical at some point, right? Whether it's current profitability or paths to profitability. Okay, scalability is important if you're building a tech company, right? Especially if you're looking for high impact in your company, or you're looking for an exit at some point. If those two things are important, and the third thing is if you want to raise VC funding, right? If those three things are even mildly important, then scalability is critical, right? A lot of people think of scalability in terms of operations and customer acquisition, but think of it in terms of pricing models as well, right? Predictability is really, really important in my opinion, because it gives you the superpower of being able to some degree, having an idea of how much money your business will make in the short to medium term, right? Once you're able to predict that with some degree of accuracy, it really just gives you superpowers as a decision maker, right? You're able to make decisions now and spend money now that you otherwise wouldn't be able to. You're able to hire, for example. You can do all sorts of things you can with that predictability. Investors love predictability as well, right? In fact, probably the single metric that not the single one, but one of the key ones that they'll attach valuations to is predictability. It's cash flow and predictability of that cash flow, right? And this is why subscription companies and SaaS companies particularly are very attractive to investors, right? And the last one, which is what I think is least considered, which is a huge shame, is viability. Some are much easier than others, right? So you have to think about what's viable for your business. What's achievable compared to the other options, right? Don't shoot for the stars and rely on that for your business to be successful. I would say have a balance between all of these in your business, right? And maybe the more viable ones are the less profitable ones, right? But you have to have a balance, right? So where does this all tie in together, right? So basically, this is a very, very quick and dirty matrix I've put together, right? If you're looking at high scalability, you've got some that are more scalable than others. If you're looking at profitability, you've got some that are more scalable than others, right? And the same for viability and same for predictability, right? I put a lot of emphasis on potential profitability and potential scalability, which is why I love SaaS companies, for example, right? I potentially consider those two things very important, right? Scalability and profitability, right? Viability, I consider extremely important, but when I go into companies, I help them with the viability side. So because of that, when I'm assessing companies, I put a lot of weight on scalability and profitability, right? And that's why I put a lot of weight on white label and enterprise SaaS, right? At the same time, predictability is important, right? So you have to figure out what's important for you and try to find a balance, I think, in terms of when you're focusing on. That being said, this all sounds very nice and theoretically wonderful, but ultimately you're going to be limited by what type of industry you're in and what type of product you have, right? So there are certain types of products where it's almost a given. It has to be a SaaS enterprise or a consumer subscription or something else, or a services business, right? But try to figure out still where you can have this balance of all of these four, right? And which quadrants it goes into. Okay, so moving on quickly, I'll get into metrics, right? We'll cover the rest of this in like 5 minutes or so, right? Metrics is basically I won't go through this in a lot of detail again, right? Metrics is the principle of being numbers oriented and how you measure things in your business, turning everything quantifiable, right? To me, if you can't quantify it in a business, it's not a business, it's a passion project. That's my personal, very biased and very mean assessment, right? If you can't quantify it, then it's a passion project, in my opinion, right? It's not a business model. It's not a commercially viable business if you can't quantify it, right? Now, there are many things you can measure, right? There are sales, customer, and financial aspects you measure, right? In sales, it's basically measuring how you're achieving new users, right? And the metrics around how easy it is and how viable that is, right? Easy and profitable that is of acquiring new users. Then there are existing customers and users, which is about traction and retention, right? And then you've got financial aspects, right? Financial arguably is the most critical, right? Which is what all of the other ones are leading indicators towards, right? Cash flow, revenue, expenses, etc. Right? Examples of sales, revenue run rate, revenue per user, etc. I won't go through these in detail, right? Customer, how much does it cost to get a customer, which is acquisition cost, right? What's the likelihood of your customer staying with you, which is churn/retention, and what's the long-term value of that customer, right? Or that user. Super important metrics, because if CAC is higher than LTV, theoretically, then you don't have a viable business model, right? That might or might not make sense to you, but if it doesn't, write that down and research it later. It's a very important principle, right? And then you've got customer or engagement aspects, right? So this is basically anything to do with how your users are currently using you and how you measure engagement, measure happiness and satisfaction and other things, right? Some of these are very qualitative, some of these are very quantitative, right? If you've got an app, for example, or you've got a tech product that either businesses or consumers are using, have some form of active usership that you're measuring. How often are they using it and what features are they using, right? If you haven't built that analytics into your product, then you've got to ask your customer, for example. If that's going down over time, especially for a new business, that's a red flag, right? So all these metrics, they're not just metrics for the sake of metrics. They symbolize something about your business, right? That enables you to either be able to evaluate your business or to make better decisions about your business, right? It's almost like a blood report reading of an individual, right? Like a diagnostic of your company, right? And then you've got financial ones here, right? Burn rate, runway is critical, which is how much theoretically, based on your burn rate and how much cash you have, how long can my business survive, right? And of course, there's margins, profitability, recurring revenue, and many others, right? So basically, I've talked about sales, customer, financials, but there are many others as well, right? The other ones I would recommend you look into are marketing metrics, operations, product, macro, which is more like industry and macro trends, and more very specific ones about your business, right? Here are some principles, right? I won't go through all these in detail, right? But just one or two I want to touch on, right? Try to break your metrics down into North Star metrics and secondary metrics, right? North Star metrics, it's basically where I've got their 2 to 4 metrics should have more attention than all other metrics at any given time, right? At any point in time of your business, there should be 1, 2, 3, or 4 metrics that are far more important than the rest put together, right? And that's indicative of your goals of your business at that point in time, right? And it's sort of a hybrid between an indicator of your business and what you should do to improve that of your business, right? But yes, just go through these in your own time, right? But seriously, if you're not metrics driven as a business, this is one of the least talked about things that can make the biggest difference, right? It's becoming more metrics oriented. Okay, so just lastly, there's a product that we're offering to Founders Institute companies, right? It's a special offer. So one of our products is we build a dashboard for companies, right? So we go in and we basically sit down with you, set your core metrics together. Then we connect data sources or we create spreadsheets for you, right? Then we customize those, then we put them onto dashboards, right? There's much more to it than that, but that's essentially you're getting an interactive dashboard that measures all sorts of things about your business. That's important for you. And it's interactive and you get alerts. You can share it with investors. You can share it with your team, all sorts of things, right? There's no real product like this on the market, which is why we're excited. Normally, it's about a 2,000 to 3,000 implementation, right? For a limited number of companies only, because we can't do this for many of them, we can set this up for free for you, right? This dashboard for you. But we'd have to assess whether or not this is really valuable for you, firstly, right? And whether your company is ready to become metrics oriented, right? This doesn't make sense for us business model wise, so we have to be very limited with the amount of companies we do it for, right? Maybe I can run through a super quick video here. This is so basically we set the metrics for you and then connect the data sources. And then this is what your dashboard looks like, basically. Something like this, right? Yeah. So you can look at this in your own time, but this is what it looks like, right? So that's a special offer we've got for, if you are interested in this, let IAMI know. And maybe IAMI can share my details as well, and you can get in touch with me directly. And then see how it goes. And we'll evaluate whether or not your metrics ready for this level of metrics. Right. But yeah, basically that's the presentation, right? On this for now. I know there's a lot of detail in there, right? And sorry if I ran through a lot of concepts really quickly. And there's a lot more I didn't cover, but hopefully that's given you some, whether or not you've learned a lot from it, I hope you've actually been alerted to some things that you may not have thought about before, right? And then go a level deeper and figure out what those are, right? On that note, I think let's open up for questions. Really sorry I went a bit over time. I totally lost track of time again. So yeah, we can take questions now for another 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I'm happy to stay 5 to 10 minutes over.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? You can put your hand up and ask, or you can type in the chat, whichever works for you. Okay, so I think until I don't see any hands up. Neo, I had a question
One hand up.
earlier.
There's one hand up.
Okay, Shirani, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm back again. First of all,
one.
yeah, thank you, Neo, so much for
That's
a really great presentation. And so I'm not sure if it's a stupid question or not, right? I was listening to how you talked about we have to focus on profitability, scalability, predictability, viability, and how enterprise SaaS was actually the best in terms of scale. Enterprise SaaS and I forgot the other one was the best in terms of scalability and profitability. Oh yeah, that one.
This is all very indicative, by the way. So
Yeah.
it's not that scientific. It's more indicative based on, anecdotal proof points I've had and personal opinions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So lots of caveats to this. Yeah. It's more the principle that's important than the specifics here. Yeah.
Yeah. No worries. So what I'm trying to ask is like, how do you I fairly understand scalability, profitability, but how do you really measure viability?
Yeah. So viability. So there are different ways to measure viability. There's no simple answer to that, right? Well, the simple answer to that is how hard is it for this model to be successful in my business, right? And I'll give you an example of this, right? If you're building a consumer advertising business, if you're building an advertising business, like a social, say you want to build the next Facebook, right? And you'll be amazed how many times I hear this pitch every month, right? Someone who wants to build the next social network, right?
Okay.
Yeah, there are, or a variation of a social network. Could be a dating social network, could be a food social network, whatever, right? There are, and one of the first things that I'll try to move them towards is them understanding viability of that, right? And this is just one example, right? The reason is I asked them the question, what do you think it will take for this to be successful based on the business models you've got in mind, right? I say, there's advertising. I say, okay, let's say advertising. What are your advertising metrics in terms of how much are you going to charge the advertiser based on, it could be slots, it could be eyeballs, it could be time, it could be pages, whatever it is, right? And then what do you think it needs for that to be successful, right? Oftentimes, when we do those numbers, they tend to need hundreds of thousands of users even to start to generate early revenue, any revenue at all, right? Let alone profitability, right? And that's one extreme example of something seeming nice on the outside, but when you think about the viability, if it takes me 100,000 users to even start to generate revenue, that's a viability issue. That's a serious viability issue, right? Unless they've already got the 500,000 users somewhere, right? So that's one example, right? Which is why I've put, consumer subscription on the high end of viability, right? And also enterprise SaaS, right? In a way, because you've got to do that, but at a SaaS level, right? But that being said, the consumer subscription should be low viable. That's my mistake. Yeah, but anyway, but that's an example of viability, right? But there are many examples of this, right? I think the best way I recommend you come up with viability is try to prototype the scenarios. When I say prototype, I don't mean build it, right? Theoretically, come up with the scenarios you would need to have in order for that business model to succeed, right? And by succeed, it's either generally, can it become profitable eventually, right? The North Star metric for all of this is profitability, right? Of all of this, right?
Yeah.
Or at least theoretically profitable, right? And if you can come up with that scenario in your head and it doesn't seem that hard, with the right metrics and modeling attached to that, that's when you can figure out viability. It really is different business by business and market by market.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's an anecdotal answer. I know I didn't answer your question properly, but that's just an anecdotal answer.
No, but it's enough to get me started, right? So, which is great, which is far from where I was. So, always great. Yeah.
Tony, if you have any more, you can ask, because I don't see any other hands raised up. So you can ask all your questions that you have. Okay, Joseph has.
Everyone else is asleep.
Yeah.
Have that effect. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Neo.
And I will come back to it after. You're mute if you're asking something. Okay, you're still mute.
I'm trusting you to curate the questions, okay? By the way.
Sure.
I'm trusting you to say who's. I see Joseph raised his hand, but.
Yeah. Joseph, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. Hi, Neo. It's a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm the founder of UMG Ventures. I'm running a health tech business. And I'm asking my own questions because I'm running a multiple products and services. And I'm wondering, what would be your recommendations, especially for the pricing of, the products which I'm bundling, okay? If I'm bundling multiple products or multiple services, so how do you make this is the fair pricing, and which model is better, and how whether it's how can I make it viable?
Yeah. So there's no way I'm going to be able to answer this properly for you right now, because the devil's in the detail with this, right? I think we need to understand what's a product versus a feature, what products work seamless to. So first of all, right, here are the considerations, I would say, right? What are your standalone products and bundles compared to which ones need to work together, right? So that's one thing.
Can I brief you a little bit? Because let's say we are having telemedicine, okay, doctor consultation services, which we want to bundles for the diagnostic tests, and then other sorts of services.
Who are your customers, by the way? Are you B2B? Are you B2B or B2C?
We are
B2C.
Servicing
hospitals?
We are B2C,
okay,
primarily.
B2C.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you need any medical consultations, we have doctors. At the same time, we run diagnostic tests for you. At the same time, we are also we are a platform to deliver medical supplies.
Yeah. Okay, medical supplies as well. Okay. So the first thing I'd say, right, because yours is quite specialized, right? In fact, it's something I didn't emphasize enough, as I should have before, right? Usually the shortcut to coming up with pricing before you go through all these other things, right, is research other similar companies in other markets, including your own market, right? And what you'll find is the best-in-class companies will probably do things in a similar way, right? And there are several examples of Joseph. Which market are you targeting? Is it Sri Lanka or is it somewhere else in South
Nepal.
Asia?
It's Nepal and India.
Okay, Nepal and India. So in India, there are quite a few of these companies, right? As there is in Southeast Asia, right? In Sri Lanka, there's a company called ODOC you can look at. right? And they've done something similar to you as well, quite successful in Sri Lanka, which is a similar market. The names I don't remember in India, but there are at least 4 or 5 of these very successful companies in India itself, right? I'm actually a shareholder for a similar platform in Hong Kong, and they're expanding into Southeast Asia, but we're more B2B now, insurance and enterprise, right? But to answer your question, I think have a look at what those other companies are doing. The second thing is try to just come up with 2 or 3 bundle tiers, right? Similar to this example you can see here, right? And then the way to think about it is saying for the first bundle, what are the services or products that will appeal to most people, right? And make them want to use us very quickly. The lowest barrier to entry one, right? And that could be a form of telemedicine, or in your case, I'm just thinking out loud here, it could be like a board, right? Where they can see all the doctors and the services that exist, right? For example. And then the next tier could be you connect them and you can have live consultations or something like that, right? Or you can just bundle telemedicine to the first one and then other value-add services into second and third one, right? But the way to bundle it is, I would say come up with 2 or 3 bundles, right? If you can. And the first should be the lower barrier to entry one, right? That most users would be drawn towards using. And then the other ones are more value add, right? More advanced users. What you don't want is to have like the most common services into your third one, and then which is too expensive, and you don't have them using the cheap ones for free. I know that, again, that's a very bad answer. I need to know more about your business, I think. Yeah.
No. It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But bundling is a good approach for you, right? But think of it as a combination of bundling and tiers and add-ons, right? That's the way I would think about it if I were you. Bundling tiers and add-ons.
That's
right?
great.
And even consider, I think, a free option where they get access to a list of doctors or something like that. I don't know. What is it that you can offer that would just get people into your ecosystem initially?
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, but sorry, I need to know a bit more about your business. Yeah.
Okay, so I think Joseph's done. Hiruni, do you have any more questions?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I really like the answers you gave Joseph as well. So he was more B2C. My next question earlier was actually going to be what kind of pricing models or type of pricing you'd recommend for B2B. And basically my kind of business, yeah.
Yeah, so for your kind of business, right, which is I think you can narrow it down to some core things to start with your kind of business, right? And I'm trying to move out of my biases here, or move away from my biases, but it definitely seems like some sort of a I think for you is yours a service-driven business or product-driven business? Actually, I don't understand that quite yet.
Product.
It's product, okay. So you're not selling your time in any way, right? You're not providing your time to the end user.
No.
At least interaction. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it should be what you're looking at here. It should be tiered pricing again, right?
Okay.
And it should be, I would say I would lean towards thinking ongoing subscription or enterprise SaaS.
Okay.
Would make sense for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say consider something like something free, whether it's a free perpetual product or a free trial, right? Of a product for a little while, right? But make sure if you're offering a free, and this goes to everyone, right? If you're offering a free trial, you have to make sure your cost of sales is low. Otherwise, it's going to break your business, right? So again, the devil's in the detail with all of this, right? Oh, this is another viability point. You asked me about viability, right?
Yeah.
Can you come up with a free trial if your cost of sales is high for that product? You cannot, right?
Okay.
Unless you've got a very long runway, right? So you've got to get your cost of sales down or come up with a version that's low cost of sales. Ideally, that's high enough value, and then offer that for free or very cheap, right? So I would consider a trial for yours, right? The other approach I would take is start to break all of your services down into features or values, right? So even before you think about tiers, right? you can probably easily come up with 3, 4, or 5 different features or values or services that you offer, right? And make that as long as possible. Try to be exhaustive with that, right? How many that is, right? So for example, one of my products is a financial model, right? And I've made so many tiers with that, right? Or options, right? There's foreign, there's, international currency transfer, there's scenarios, there's projections, there's multi-currency, there's agile users, there's dashboards. I basically looked at all the features of my financial model and listed them down, right? And then what I did was I said, what are the critical parts of that appeal to most users? And that's my first tier. And then I've said, what's the next tier that can be more advanced that they would potentially pay more for? And then what's the part I can really make a lot of margins out of that are really the power users, right? And once I listed that out exhaustively, those features, then it was much easier for me to be modular, to move that into different packages and tiers, right, accordingly. And that's how I'd recommend you think about what you do, right? It seems to, most of your types of businesses are primarily driven by 2 value drivers, right? One is features or services, right? And the second is number of end users, right? Typically speaking, right? So you have to figure out also if, I think with end users, one is it's just a pure revenue opportunity where if you've got end users that have thousands of users, they should be paying more per month than an end user that's got, 25 users, right? Not because it costs more for you, but because they can afford it. It's value-based pricing, right? And they benefit more for it. You would assume they make much more revenue as a result of it, right? The second consideration with the per seat or per end users or per end user is what does it cost you? Does it cost you more to service any additional user? Again, goes back to cost of sales, right? If it does, then you need to tier out by end users for sure. And that can happen in 2 ways. You can either break that down into the different tiers, or you have standardized tiers based on features, and then you have a drop down on the bottom, which is based on number of users. And then it readjusts based on number of users, and it gives them a final price. Yeah. But I don't know your business that well, so I'm just basing it on, a very quick summary you gave me, right? So I could be way off the mark here, but if I were to just, make some bold hypotheses, right, based on what you told me, it seems like those are some things to consider, right, initially.
Yeah, actually, you're almost like right on point, because I've seen this kind of model on a few of the competitors, but there's like different models on the competitors, so it kind of got me confused as well at the same time. But in terms of picking out,
which isn't a bad thing. Which isn't a bad thing at all. It just means you have to take a evidence-driven approach to figuring it out, I suppose, right? Very, very rarely do companies get their pricing right in the first year. In fact, almost 0 times. They might get it good enough, but they won't get it perfect, right? So just the fact that you're aware that you need to research more is already a good thing, I think. But speak to your customers, right? I mean, this is I think Ayami and the FI team must have talked your ear off about this, right? About this single point, which is talk to your customers,
yeah,
right?
definitely.
Ultimately, that's the only data point that matters at the end of the day, regardless of what your advisors tell you, or what these presentations tell you, or what your competitors tell you. Ultimately, what matters is what the market tells you. Either they're telling you explicitly, or you're learning through their behavior, right? So that's ultimately what's going to judge this. So maybe you can figure out ways to split test it. That's one option, right? Split test different pricing, or change it for different customers at different times, right? So there's no reason you can't do that, right? There's no reason you can't have different pricing for different users.
Okay.
Nothing illegal or unethical about that, right?
Okay, awesome. Good to know. Yeah.
As long as you have your ethical principle, as long as you have your ethical boundaries, right? Where you're communicating the right way, you think you're always, adding value to justify that price, etc. And also do some risk management, right, around that, where if one customer finds out another customer said the same thing for cheaper, right, then that's on you. That's a risk that you take, right? So factor that in, and you can solve that through communication or other things usually, right? You can also do things by offering limited time offers or bundles or discounts or something, right? And all these
Yeah.
are different testing mechanisms.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Got it. Thank you so much, Neo. Yeah. I think I'll have to put that to use and see now. If
No
no one
worries.
else has any other if no one else has questions, I have one more. Yeah.
Go ahead, Rooney.
Yeah.
By the way, I've got a freemium model for my presentations. First 3 questions are free.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
4 and more it will cost. No, just kidding. Keep going.
Yeah. So this question comes back to, you said, like, we have to talk to our customers and get their feedback and see how the pricing works, right? Exactly how does that conversation go? How do you actually, because I'm not selling at the moment, right? We're still building. And we're talking to customers. We have ones who are interested in piloting the product, and I spoke to one just today actually, and but again, we're still not sure about the pricing. So
I think so some of it. So sometimes you can get explicit feedback, right? But most times you'll have to understand various factors to be able to narrow down pricing, right? For example, I think 2 things that are very difficult early on that take time to figure out, and it'll be nuanced, right? It'll be nuanced for you to figure this out, is when you think of value-based pricing, what's the additional value they gain from your product, right? That's a superpower if you can understand that, right? If you can understand what the incremental value their business will get over a certain period of time by using your product, that's usually the shortcut to pricing, right? Assuming cost-based and competitive also makes enough sense, right? The other aspect, which is often not talked about enough as well, is affordability for a user, right? Both affordability and what to them psychologically made sense, right, as a price point that's viable for them, right? And again, you need to have conversations with you. I would say, who's your target audience specifically? Like, if you were to summarize it in one or 2 sentences, like what's your customer profile?
Customer profile is a mid-sized company that has around 2 to 5 lawyers or so. So very small legal team, but deals with a lot of contracts.
Okay, in-house legal team,
essentially like a construction firm, right?
Okay. So this is an in-house legal team, right?
Yes.
You're talking about, right?
Legal team.
Yeah. Okay. So then I think it's, when you say value add, it's not going to be about them generating more revenue, right? It seems like the value proposition for them is increased quality, like increased efficiency and increased effectiveness of their legal team in some form, right? Something along those lines, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay, and process improvement, etc., right? And maybe better data analytics, all that stuff, right? So I think it's hard to figure out how much money they'll make in addition to this. I think you'd have to figure out what their sweet spot for a subscription service of your type is, right? If I were to guess, it would be somewhere, again, this is just pulling stuff out of thin air, right? I would guess it's somewhere between $20 a month to $200 a month, right? That's a very wide range, right?
Yeah.
That they'd be willing to, that's a very wide range. But you would assume that anything above 20 or 30, it's below that they're not even thinking about that, right? For a company that size, if they're already hiring 5 in-house, right? But if you're getting to $200, $300 per month subscription, that gets into, okay, this needs to be a serious subscription, right? A lot of enterprises don't even pay that much for a lot of businesses, right? So I think you've got to figure out just trialing it with a few customers early on, right? And seeing what you can narrow it down to, right? I think you can ask the question, if I would offer you this base set of services, right?
Okay.
This is my price. What do you think? Right? And then they might say, okay, let's do it. And then you say, okay, for this additional money, would you consider this? Or how much more would you pay for this service, for example? Right?
Yeah.
But usually they won't explicitly tell you that, or if they tell you, they're unconsciously biased.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the thing you have to be, and not just, they're not lying to you, it's unconscious bias.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. So So really, you won't know this until you speak to, I would say you need significant, like critical mass of at least 5 to 10 companies you speak with, of different types of companies, right? And you're going to get hugely varying price points, right? Like I've built financial models and consulting services for startups and people, you know, for 10 plus years, and I'm still on price discovery with this, right? Depending on what stage they're at, depending on how important it is to them, etc. And I'm constantly trading. Yeah. And the other advice I would give is maybe you can, until you figure it out, you can have a base price and a second price, like maybe a base which is super cheap and affordable or free, a second price which is palatable to many users, but then have a customized one, right? Where you just, and that's really custom pricing discovery. You use that customized pricing for, where you say, let me understand your needs, right? And then based on their needs, and then you try to get an idea of what they can afford. And this is nuanced, right? And then you marry that together with a proposal or an offer, right? So maybe your first step is your first few months, you're doing customized proposals to companies based on that, and just testing that. And then basically your tiered pricing is a more like scalable version of that, where you've got better data.
Yeah.
So if you go to my website, Launchr, like I've got tiered pricing for all my products. I've got about 30 products there, right?
Okay.
But the way I came up with that tiered pricing was years of building proposals, of building customized proposals, right? There's no other company in the world really that has tiered pricing for the stuff that we do, or for all of our products anyway. So the way I came up with that was proposals over time. But it took a lot of like feedback to figure that out. And even now, most of our clients are still, it's not through those tiered pricing. It's actually customized proposals.
Nico, I have a very small question.
Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah, I missed to ask you one of my problem regarding the pricing. While making subscriptions, like what we have done is like we are giving, you know, applications to doctor as well. So doctor is controlling the price themselves, right? One doctor is like quoting his one price, and another doctor is, you know, they are setting their price differently. So in that context, I'm having a complications like to bundle my service. Okay, in that context, how can I solve this problem?
So I think so maybe the first question I should have asked you was, are you doing something more on a commission basis, where you connect doctors to patients and you take a percentage of their consultation fee or something like that? Or okay, because I was thinking 3 models for your business, right? That's one. The second model is to charge consumers on a subscription, right? And they get access to things on an ongoing basis. And the third is charge doctors a listing fee, right? Or something along those lines, right? But you're doing the commission, right? So commission is harder to bundle. Commission is very hard to bundle, right? Just off the bat, right? One is because of the problem you just mentioned, right? It's really a problem. It's just a reality, right? That you mentioned, that doctors price things differently, as they should, right? And then you just take a commission of that, right? I think the bundling can happen separately, right? Or you agree on different tiers of service your doctor provides, and you dictate those tiers to your doctor, right? For example, I mean, this is a very bad example, right? But it could be, for example, it's an audio consultation versus a video consultation, right? And for the video, it charges more than the audio. Or it could be 5-minute slot, 10-minute slot, 30-minute slot, or something like that, right? And then you reprice based on that. I know that's not technically a bundle, but if you're going to bundle based on a doctor's pricing, then you've got to create categories for the doctor to be able to bundle or tier things in, right? So bundling and tiering is a similar principle in this sense. I struggle to see how you're going to do that if your main model is based on commission, right? To be honest, unless your consumers are paying you for something separately, right? That your platform provides, then you can bundle or tier. But at the moment, if it's purely commission, you're at the mercy of the doctor pricing, I believe.
Yeah, that's what we need to compromise, because doctors sign off with us, and almost like we are taking a flat commissions from almost all the listed doctors which are verified in our platform. But we are giving the control, you know, of pricing for different doctors based on their specialty. Like if they want to go
and
different,
you'd have
like
to.
we are giving, you have given them flexibility, and that's creating a problem in our pricing.
It's a problem, but it's a necessity in what you're doing. I've seen this model play out in many markets, and in most markets, almost without exception, actually, the doctors have the bargaining power here. Until you will have the bargaining power once you create critical mass that the doctors need you more than you need them.
Okay.
Right. Then you can create more frameworks that have to work within. But until you scale a bit more, I think you have to do that. Then what I would think about is what are the value add services can you provide to your consumers through your platform, right? It could be like, you know, medical records or follow-ups or scheduling, right? Or something like that. Maybe it's cross-selling different recommendations of different services and products elsewhere, right? You could have content on there, for example. So think outside the box, right? What are all the other ways that you can add value and therefore monetize and therefore, you know, give you more flexibility, right? In addition to the doctor consultation. That's an extension of that. That's probably the way I would think about it.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to think about bundling or subscriptions.
Understood. What we have done till today is we have grouped the doctors, and there are only few doctors like which are too rigid, and they are super specialized, and they have they are super specialized. They mean every people want to book their, you know, slots. So those doctors are rigid.
I've just got a tip for you, by the way. This is outside the scope of this presentation. To take your business to the next level, I think you have to do one of two things, if not both. I think one is you have to create an ecosystem around this. I don't think your business will thrive and be really as successful as it can purely on doctor telemedicine and commission, right? That's my hypothesis based on my experience and observations, right? So it's either going to move into an ecosystem play, right? One of these three things: ecosystem play, where you're providing a value add of other things. It could be content, it could be cross-selling, etc. It could be medical records, all that stuff, right? To your consumers, that's one option. Second option is you go B2B, right? So you work with insurers and corporates, right? Corporate wellness programs and insurance companies. And you'll find the business model is much more viable with that, right? But the product has to be very good, of course. And the third is make it easier for the doctors. This is probably your most important one, right? What I mean by that is find out the pain points of your doctors that are beyond just getting new patients. What you'll probably find is they need help with admin. They probably need help with booking and scheduling, and they need help with some analytics and maybe some other areas.
Okay.
Right. And then offer them a subscription based on that. My theory is a few doctors will pay for that.
Thank you.
That's a guess right now, but that's what you need to test out.
Okay. We'll try, definitely.
Do you know what I mean? Like and they should be easy to build, right? And you say, in addition to new customers, will make your life easier in these ways, right?
Okay.
It's a slightly different business model, but yeah.
All right. So thanks a lot, Neo. So I'm just going to ask you one more question, because there's one person. So it's raining very heavily here. So there's one person who had trouble with the internet connection, but they sent me the question. So the thing is, they don't have the funds to build something themselves, and they're way too early to get any investment as well, right? So, but even the conversation we'd have with them is to try and find a client who will pay to build like a custom thing for them, right? And then they can use that to slowly build their own product and then put like a subscription or something afterwards, right? So the question there is, like, if you're, for example, approaching a company to say like, hey, we want to, like, we are offering this thing, are you interested in custom building something for you? Meaning they are getting something built for them specifically. How would you price that? Like how would you go about pricing that? Would you look at what the tech companies are looking at, charging for that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's the same principle, right? You'd have to go, I think, less cost plus at that point, right? I think at this point, you just do whatever you can get, right? So it's less about cost plus at this point. I think there's definitely competitive pricing and value-based pricing approaches. Competitive pricing is do research into understanding what other developers or whatever, like you can go and ask other people yourself around this, right? Freelancers and agencies. to see how much they would charge, right? And if you're not doing that, you're already in a blind spot, right? If you're not doing that. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing is, it's back to the feedback I gave Joseph. Speak to your customer, and well, Joseph and sorry, he only more than Joseph actually, which is speak to your customer and keep building customized proposals, right? Even if one varies from the other, they're going to be different, right? And then you'll figure out after 5 or 6, you'll get much better at figuring it out, right? So it's about speaking with them. Always start with understanding what their pain points are, right? Don't try to shove this is a big piece of advice in general. Don't try to shove a product down the throat of a new customer where you don't have a reputation, right? Don't tell them, oh, I've got this amazing things, you'll benefit, right? Bad start. Go and ask them what their pain points are. Say, we're building something. We want to benefit this type of company, your type of company, do this type of thing, right? We would love to have you as an early customer, or maybe just someone we built something for. But first, we want to understand your pain points better, a bit more. So open-minded, right? Don't go in with bias, and don't go in with the sales mentality, right? Ask them open-ended questions. Then they'll probably be a bit more vulnerable and open to it, right? And then try to understand how much they would pay for it. And or you can tell them, to do that, this is how much it would cost us, right? For example. And then it might be a no or a yes. And then if they say no, de-scope it and say, what about this, right? And then if they say no again, then figure out, what should I build for free just to get to the next stage?
All right. So I think that's great feedback. So it's 8:31 now, so I really think we should wrap up. So thank you, Nia, for taking so much time to answer all the questions. Really appreciate it. And I think it was like super useful for the founders, like even the ones who are not here because they'll be watching the video, but a lot of the questions that I think were posed were really useful for everyone. So Nia, thank you so much. So please send me an email with, I think, the details about Launchr, and I'll send it out to everyone, and anyone who's interested can get in touch with you directly. So I think that'll also work out as well. So thank you so much.
And if anyone wants one-on-ones, if anyone wants one-on-ones, just let IAME know. I'm not technically a mentor this time, just because of my, I'm terrible with time management these days. But just let IAME or myself know directly, and we can organize something. Yeah.
On that,
and I'll send the deck as well.
Do you prefer WhatsApp, email, or LinkedIn? Like for people to reach out to you, what's your preferred?
I do. WhatsApp is the best. I'm just conscious of, I can't do too many. That's the only thing. Yeah, okay. I think WhatsApp is best. But let's chat about this offline, IAME, and let's see if we can curate it a bit better. Yeah, right. Let's chat first. But WhatsApp by default. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. But I definitely can't have 20 WhatsApp meetings. Yeah.
No, it's a thing like office
I'll try my best.
When you're available. So if you're not, then you just pause it until you're available next, right? So that's fine.
Yeah, or I can. Yeah, okay. Let's figure it out. It could be office hours or it could be WhatsApp. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So then I'm gonna end the session. So Neo, thank you so much. Founders, thank you so much for coming and staying on for extra. So I'm gonna end the session. If anyone has any questions, you can stay behind and ask me. Neo, feel free to go. I think we've taken a lot of your times. Thank you so much for that.
I've got to jump to another call now. Yeah, so I've got to go.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, Neo.
Okay, thanks, guys. And thanks for the questions, Hirini and Joseph. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Neo.
Right. Guys, speak soon, hopefully. Bye, everyone.
IAME will be sharing the link, right? For the recording?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll send IAME the deck as well, so you guys have that as a reference.